Hello everyone, my name is Matei Nagu. I'm a software engineer at Adobe. Thank you for joining me at this presentation. Today we will talk about API Tour, getting to know the new APIs we as AM shipped in the last 6 months. The agenda for today is firstly to get familiar with our APIs, the ones that we had and the ones that we felt like needed some improvements. And those are the open APIs, of course. Then we will go through a demo with the open APIs. And after that, we will finish with connecting a third-party application via eventing. Let's start with a standard headless architecture. We are not different than any others. We, of course, want to have a robust architecture. So the apps in general will have a UI part and a backend part. The backend part or the content part will just be creating the content and modifying the content, whereas the UI part will be designing it and consuming it, be it a mobile application, a browser application, or anything else. On the schema, the AM headless content fragments is where our APIs are stored for now. So let's start with GraphQL. This is the original solution that we came up with, that we used. I feel like it's only normal to start with some positives on why we've chose GraphQL. It's a great solution for content in general. It's very fast to fetch a large quantity of content to be able to get multiple and different types of content with one simple request. It basically simulates, or it can simulate hundreds of REST calls with only one GraphQL call, which is a great plus. One other thing is it's very good at complex system and microservices. Imagine that Adobe was once a big monolith that in the meantime migrated to microservices. Of course, we needed something to be able to handle this transition, to have an adaptive schema, which GraphQL is doing this with a great success. So another point for it. And another benefit that I feel like it's great to mention now is no overfetching or underfetching, which basically means that you will receive exactly what you asked for. Nothing more, nothing less. Why is this good? Because, of course, nobody wants to have hundreds of content fragments or articles if they are only interested in 2 or 3 of them. On the other hand, there are, of course, some negatives. The main trade-off would be the query complexity of GraphQL. As I said, the schema is adaptable. Imagine hundreds of multi-services that are interconnected, how big the schema can get. So if you want to make a request, the request, if you want to make it granular, the request can be big and the performance can, of course, be impacted as well. Why I want to emphasize the size of the request is that the second problem with GraphQL is caching. Probably you know that GET requests are limited to around 2,000 characters. Well, if you have a really big schema, a GraphQL request can be enormous. So it would be over the 2,000 character limit that GET requests are limited to. This means that you will have to use a post request, which some of the browsers are not caching by default, and some of them are not caching at all, which of course is a big problem. Consider a product launch where you want responsiveness to be there and the user experience to be on point. If it takes 10 seconds to load, then this is not the ideal user experience. Of course, there are solutions that we implemented for caching, even for the post request for GraphQL. But if you can use a browser cache, for instance, it's way faster than any other solution. So it should be the go-to go to solution. Now, I would like to show the interface that we have for GraphQL queries. It's pretty simple. Let's look at fetching a list of adventures. Adventures is a type of content. It's not relevant to this explanation. And I will not go super in depth with this because a colleague of mine will have a presentation that will cover more in depth this discussion. But let's do a request for adventures. This means to gather a list of all the adventures that we have locally, we've stored locally. As you can see, we have a data object with a list of items that are all adventures. So that's it. That's pretty basic, right? Now imagine that this request can fetch all the content fragments that are adventures. So if the request is not granular enough or it's not filtered, it can have an impact on the performance. Now, as I said, you can simulate with a GraphQL request, multiple REST requests. In this example, I will show just a simulation of two, let's say, fetching the adventure list and another list, the article list. I've added here a filter just to have fewer results. Let's run this. And you can see on the right side that we have an adventure list with two items, both of them being of activity surfing, and an article list here with all the articles that we've stored locally. On the right side of the screen, you can see the Explorer with the schema. It's basically a helper that facilitates you in writing easy queries. Okay. Now, GraphQL is great, but sometimes it lacks some features that we are looking for. So here comes OpenAPI. I feel like the definition from SmartBear is really good, so I will just go quickly through it. So the OpenAPI specification defines a standard language-agnostic interface to RESTful APIs, which allows both humans and computers to discover and understand the capabilities of the service without access to source code, documentation, or through network traffic inspection. Now, there are multiple important points in this definition, but in my opinion, some of the main ones are that OpenAPI deals only with RESTful APIs, which, if we consider that more than 85% of the traffic on the internet today is using REST APIs in one form or another, it's great. Another one would be that it's language agnostic, so we are not forcing engineers to work with a language that they are not comfortable with, which will make a huge will have a huge role later in the presentation. You will see just a second. But first, let's go to benefits of OpenAPI over GraphQL. As I mentioned previously, most of the engineers are used to working with a REST API. So imagine someone stumbling over an API which has a definition clear, we've had some sample requests and a sandbox that is ready to use. How easy it would be for the engineer to start playing a little bit with it and seeing if maybe it actually fits perfectly on their use cases. And if this is the case, then they can be our inside man in their company. So by creating a product that, in this case, an API that the engineers can easily start working with, we are making ourselves more visible to different companies. One other part would be that it's extremely common. So the REST APIs are more common than the GraphQL APIs. There are a lot of engineers that never used GraphQL or never heard of it. So there will be an initial barrier, or maybe they will be not so happy to start working with an GraphQL API just because they don't know what it is or how they should use it. And one more thing that I want to focus on would be caching. As mentioned previously, some of our customers are really big. They need some great solutions, some great caching solutions. If we can improve in this direction, then we should do it, and we found a solution for this. Not a problem, but we've improved it, let's say. All right. Now, let's go to productization. What is productization? We inside Adobe realized that an API is not just an API. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It's an actual product. It should be very well defined. It should be clear what it's doing. It should be clear how is it helping the engineer in general, and how can a company can use it to better enhance their performance of their products or their solution for their clients as well. So we are starting and we are continuing to consider APIs as products. What this means is that we are providing a clear schema that helps engineers to correctly use our APIs to their best and to their advantage. One other thing I should mention is that all the APIs that I will be talking again today are already onboarded or early adopters are already onboarded on these APIs. So if you are interested, stick around and you will see how you can also get access to them. All right, for the building blocks now. Imagine that you want to create some content. It would be way better to not start with nothing. It would be better to have some structure, right? So you can have a clear idea of what you can do and what you can do. So in AM, there are two types of building blocks, let's say. The first one is a content fragment, or CF. What is a content fragment? Well, it's just basically a wrapper for content. You can imagine it like it's plain content, no design, no fluff, no nothing. It just enables you to store content easily and efficiently in a structured manner. Now, if you ask how do you define the structure? Well, here comes the second building block, the Content Fragment Model, or the CFM. As maybe you can realize the connection between them, but we have the same field in the CFM in the Content Fragment Model as we have in the Content Fragment, which means that you cannot create a content fragment that is based on a Content Fragment Model, which is like a blueprint, and not follow the structure that the Content Fragment Model forces. All right, so let's get into the fun part of this presentation, to the actual demo. I have something prepared here. We will start, of course, with a Content Fragment Model. You cannot create a content fragment without a Content Fragment Model, so let's start here. A first request. I will go a little bit slower with first request, just to explain in details what we have here, what we are working with, and then we will move a little bit faster. So the first thing that you should see is that we just provide a name. We provide a configuration folder, which I will explain in 1 second, and a list of fields. Now, the list of fields are what the Content Fragment Model will have as a blueprint. In this case, we have a title that is of type text and which is required. Now, what you should know is that there are multiple predefined field types, like text, number. We will go into content reference a little bit later, and you can only use these types of fields, which enable you to do basically anything, but you have to use this structure. Let's run this post request. As you can see, we received a 201 request. If we go to the browser, because we didn't specify any configuration folder, the default configuration folder will be used. In this case, it's the global configuration folder. As you can see, it was modified or created 11 seconds ago. It has the name that we've specified, a simple CFM with a description test. And this is pretty much it. You can edit it, and you can see that there is only one field with a name title. Now, if we move to the next request, you can do the same thing and that I showed in the browser. You can just run a GET request, and you have all the information here. And you can see that it has the name, it was last created by me, and it has the information, the structure that we've provided with only one field. Of course, we can delete any content fragment model if the content fragment model is not used in other content fragments, so you do not break the schema in general or the application. One thing I want to mention is that you can see over here that we require an if match header. This means that, or the if match header, the value for the if match header is the e tag that we get from actually getting the fragment that we've created, which means that you are not able to delete a content fragment model that was modified by others. Let me explain this a little bit better. Imagine there are two contributors to the same product. Both of them wanted to modify a content fragment model. Me, I'm a little bit slower, so let's say that my colleague is moved a little bit faster and modified the content fragment model. Well, in that case, the e tag will be different than the e tag that I have right now, which means that if I'm trying to delete the version of content fragment model that I know to be true, which is not the case, I will just receive an error, right? So we are expected to receive a 412, which tells us that the e tag of the content fragment model is not the last one, which informs us that the content fragment model was modified in the meantime. If I'm completing it with the correct e tag, then everything should work as expected. Well, if I'm actually using the, let's see. I think I ran it 2 times. I ran it 2 times. It's fine. We don't have it in the UI, so it got deleted successfully. All right, let's go to a more complex example, which would be to create a content fragment model with more than one field. It's not common to have a content fragment model with only one field. It's not really useful. So in this example, let's go to actually creating one called attraction at the folder of ADL, which I will show you in the browser how it could look. And the 3 fields that we have are text. The first one is of type text. The second one is of type number with a restriction. That means that you will not be able to fill any number greater than 2023. And a Boolean, if it's open or not to the public. So if we are running this request, we go to 201. Let me just save this ID for multiple uses. All right. Now, if we go into the ADL folder right here, you will see that an attraction was created 22 seconds ago. If we want to edit it, you see that there are 3 fields, the 3 fields that we've defined here, which are name, year, and if it's open or not. You can see that the name has a star. That means that it's required as specified in the model. Okay. Again, if you want to create a GET request for this to have the information as a JSON, you can do so. All right. One more thing that I mentioned previously was the ability to create a reference to another content fragment. In this case, we are creating a content fragment model called location with 2 fields. The first field being of type text, and the second one being of content fragment. Now, this means that you can only use this content fragment model, the location content fragment model, with a relevant content fragment model that is of type of attraction. So if we are taking the ID from here, and we are referencing here in the items, we can see that the content fragment model was created, and that we can actually see it in the UI as well. Now, a content fragment model is nothing without content, of course, so without the content fragment. But first, I would like to show you some things that you can't do, and it's good that you cannot do because it protects you from ruining your application. Now, in this case, let's start with a bad reference. As previously showed, you need a valid ID for your content fragment field. If not, you can break your application by referencing something that is not there. So in this example, because we've provided a random UUID, we get a 400 request with a non-existing model, which is expected. One other thing would be the field types. As I mentioned previously, we are working only with predefined field types. In this case, I'm not sure that there is any unicorn defined in our application. Let's see. Well, unfortunately, we have no unicorns, but let's hope that they will soon be added, of course. You get a relevant message that the unicorn is not a subtype that you cannot use, you can use at the current moment. One other thing I wanted to show you is the field validation. Now, validation at field level is extremely important. It can help you protect the integrity of your application. Imagine that you want to change a content fragment model that maybe is already used or that has content fragments that are referencing to it. If you are messing with some fields that are missing their validation, then everything can be destroyed, right? The customer experience as well, which is definitely nothing that you should look forward to. So we are trying to protect in general our customers by having this validation at field level. Now the thing that I wrote here as an example, it's a number type that has a minimum and a max value defined, and a default value that is not between the two values. So we can see in the response that the message is clear that min should be less or equal than default value, and default value should be less or equal than max, which is standard mathematics. All right. One other thing that may happen, and we should be aware, and we are aware of protecting against it, is cycle referencing. Imagine that you have a content fragment A in this case that is referencing content fragment B, and the second one, content fragment B, is referencing content fragment C, and C then is referencing A. In this case, if you want to load the application and to consume the content, everything will break because it will create an infinite loop. Resources will be just spent for nothing. Nothing will render. So we are protecting the customers by validating when creating multiple content fragment models in the same request, by validating that what they are creating doesn't contain any cycle. In this case, there is a cycle with models B, A, and C. All right. Now, what good it would be to only have content fragment models and no content fragments, right? Well, let's populate some content fragments based on the content fragment models that we've just created. The content fragment, this content fragment that we are creating now will be called attraction. And it's based, as you can see, on the model that we've created previously, which is stored in ADL and attraction. Now, if you remember, we've provided 3 fields. We've created 3 fields for this content fragment model. The first one is name, the second one is year, and the third one is open. So in this case, if we run this post command, request. I will just get the ID again for later. 1 second. Yeah, and we should go in the browser and see if the content fragment is created. And would you look at that? It's over here with the data that we've completed in the post request. Now, of course, there are a lot of instances where we create some content. There are some mistakes, or we just changed our mind. We wanted to change the name, let's say. Well, I don't want to be forced to go into the UI and then manually change it and save it and then validate that everything is working as expected, right? So let's, as I said in previously, if we want to modify something, in this case, we would like to modify the content fragment, we need to use the e tag. Now we are running the get on the fragment ID that we've just generated, and we will get the current e tag, which is this one. And we will just run a patch command, patch request on this fragment ID with the operation of replace for the path element /name with the value new hotel Sinai. If we look closer in the request that we previously did, all the elements that we've created are stored in the elements property under the keys name, year, and open in this example. All right, so we expect that after we run this patch command, the name of the hotel or the value of the text would be new hotel Sinai. Let's see if this happens. We can also see the request here that it's the new hotel Sinai, but you can also see it here. If we just refresh, you can see that the new prefix is over here. Now you can say, okay, this is fine, but what if I want to have multiple changes? It would be insane to go one by one, right? Well, of course, you are not required to do it one by one. This is why we provide the option of patching multiple fields at the same time. As you can see, we are now changing the year to 2009 and the name to Hotel Montana from Hotel Sinai. If we are running this and we are going back into the browser, you can see that the two values are changed. Now, one other use case that we've encountered is the fact that sometimes the page is really big. You want to make multiple changes. You may also have validation on some fields, as it should be, to be able to be sure that you don't mess anything up. So what are you doing? You don't want to sit through a whole page of editing and after that realize that you've missed some comma and then everything is back from zero, right? So you can just use this flag of validated false, which basically means that, hey, this is still a work in progress. Please do not modify it for the clients to actually consume. So from Hotel Sinai, let's try to modify it to new from Hotel Montana to new Hotel Montana. Let's see if this request is okay. It is okay. We receive the 200. But if we go into the browser and we refresh it, you can see that it's still the old name of the hotel. Now, if you are done with changing your page or your content fragment, and you want to, let's say, commit the changes and have the content be ready to be consumed, you just have to make another patch request with validated true. In this case, I elected to change the Boolean, which is if it's open or not, to a value of false instead of true. It's again a 200. And if we go, as you can see, it was ticked and it was Hotel Montana. If you refresh this, we have new Hotel Montana and the tick is off. So basically, you can change how many changes you want and only commit once to have all the changes applied at the same time. All right. As previously mentioned, you can create content fragments with reference to other content fragments. And this example is just that. We are creating a location content fragment that has a link to a content fragment attraction. right? So by just running this, you can see that it was created. I will get again this ID. You can get the ID, and you can see that the path to the model that is referenced is in a ADL and at a traction level. Let's go back. You can see this location that it has an attraction that is of type content fragment, as seen here. All right, now I feel like the last thing we should do with a content fragment is to delete it. It happens to need to remove some content, of course. So again, if you want to modify content fragment, you need the e tag to be placed in the if match header. And by doing so, by requesting this delete, you receive a 204, which means that the content fragment was deleted. Let's double check, and yes, it was deleted. All right. This is pretty much the demo for the content fragment and content fragment models. I wanted to quickly show you the documentation. So we are, as said, APIs are our products. We want to be able to show a schema that it's easily to understand, and an engineer can be clear what they can do and what are the use cases that can map on their needs. So if you go to this link, don't worry, it's going to be at the end of the presentation as well. And you go to content fragments and models. You can see all the requests that you can do here. For instance, let's get to creating a new content fragment model and look at what types of fields we can actually use. So I mentioned that we can create a number, a text, right? If you go in the description at fields, you can see what fields are required, and the type which is required. You can see this is the list of content fragment of types of field types that we are using for now. So we are allowing users to use in their content fragment models. Okay, let's continue. We finished with creating, with going through content fragment models and content fragments. So after going through this, it's only normal to be able to actually consume the events that are generated from creating the content fragments and content fragment models, right? So we have the eventing part that is which basically means that AM is able to emit events for actions on domain objects, and they are not only limited to content fragments, they are also emitting to their content fragment models. Now, the events that we are triggering are created, updated, all events at variation, deleted, published, and unpublished, which basically means everything. Now, how our customers can consume these events are, of course, through some webhooks, and I will have a show example in a few seconds, or as the payload of Adobe App Builder functions. Now, you have this UI. I will highlight some parts of it, which are here, that the subscribe events. Normally, of course, you are not required to subscribe to all events. If you just want a handful of them, you can just subscribe and to only those ones and act accordingly. And the second relevant information on this image is that the webhook URL, if you read through it, it's a Slack webhook, which basically means that we will there will be a webhook that is going to send a message on Slack when something happens. And now we will look at the example. So this is an example of eventing in action. You can see over here that one of the types of eventing that we are using is a variation. So the type is AM sites content fragment variation, which means that something happened on a variation of a content fragment. This is the wrapper of the metadata. So we have the wrapper where we have this information of type, ID, source, and the actual information is stored in the data, where we have the change subtype. So the variation was modified. We have some other properties like the path, or we have a user for audit, so on and so forth. Okay, so as a summary to go through what we went through today, we firstly got familiar with our APIs, both the GraphQL part and the OpenAPI part. We went through the demo where I showed you how you can use the Content Fragment and Content Fragment Models API, and after that, a brief overview of how you can connect third-party applications with Adobe Events. All right, so questions. If you have any questions, I will go through them momentarily. If you want to continue this discussion, please scan the QR code. All right. Well, I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you joined me today. If you are interested in using Content Fragment Models and Content Fragment APIs or eventing, please scan the QR code that it's now on the screen and get in contact with us. If you enjoyed this presentation, again, please share this with me. Greatly appreciated. And thank you for joining, and have a great day and enjoy the rest of the event.